What is going on, Diesel Nation? We're excited to have you guys with us today on the Diesel Podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube and aren't subscribed, make sure and click the subscribe button, like, comment. Let us know what you think about the episode. If there's a particular guest or topic that you'd like to have on, we love to see your feedback on there and then be able to get them on to future episodes. Today, I'm going to be joined by Kory Willis from PPEI, and I wanted to talk with him about transmission tuning. He's got some really cool stuff that PPEI has just released. Also, diesel tuning in general, and some really cool things for 2024 that we're looking forward to. Before we get to it, though, I want to remind you our friends over at Kershaw Knives have a 20% off code for you. Go to Kershaw.kaiusa.com and use code DIESEL2023. It's a great way to save some money, get some really cool gear. So if you need a knife for hunting, fishing, EDC around the job site, they've definitely got you covered. All right, let's get to today's podcast with Kory Willis and talk about diesel tuning. Kory, welcome back to the Diesel Podcast. I enjoy chatting with you. I think every time we talk about something, I learn about tuning. I learn about all the things that are going on in automotive and elsewhere. So I look forward to catching up with you today, talking about some really cool things as well with Eason transmission tuning, 10-speed Allison stuff. But I just wanted to start with see what have you been up to since we chatted last?
Yeah, dude, glad to be back with you. It's always a pleasure. Man, honestly, life's been kind of crazy lately. We're kind of coming off of this crazy COVID hangover that everybody was dealing with. And then alongside of that, we had the hurricanes that we dealt with, everyone knows about. And then obviously all the EPA nonsense. So it's been like, I guess you could say the last few years have been more survival mode than anything. So, and then the last year being kind of like a hangover from all of that. And I'd say, man, the last 6 months, I really realized that like I was physically unfit. I went to my doctor and he's like, yo, you're basically a pre-diabetic. And I was like, okay, I need to fix that. So now six months roughly ago, I started kind of focusing on health and fitness a little bit more. I used to be in great shape. So started working on that a little bit more. And along with, obviously, many folks know how it goes. Whenever you start focusing on your health and fitness, all your mental clarity starts coming together. And got off of the prescriptions that the doctor had me on for irritable bowel syndrome and ADHD and all this other stuff. And so it's crazy how clear and awesome life is whenever you yourself are more clear.
It's been really interesting kind of looking back at the last 3 years and all the different pressures. And I find sometimes with myself, I trap myself maybe in a bubble, so to speak, where I'm focusing on content and automotive and personal things. And I forget about all that stuff that's out there. And I think from a truck perspective or an automotive perspective, it's been, I think what you mentioned is really true. I see a lot of innovation, a lot of new things that are coming out, just the supply of parts and things that people can have. It feels like it's just getting ready to explode with tons of new development, tons of new products. And I know that's definitely something we haven't covered enough on, with the podcast, is just what the last 3 years have been like. And if you're an automotive enthusiast or just anybody, it's how crazy it's been.
It's been so crazy, dude. You're absolutely right. And aside from just, me trying to personally get myself more healthy, the company's been slammed. So we had expectations for this year of like a 75 roughly % gain over the previous years. We talked before about, this new market emissions present and like just how different it was. And then, getting it to where it's profitable again, while still having the same customer service you'd expect. And man, it was pretty crazy, but yeah, likewise, we've been working on a lot of new stuff. We've got some electronics and hardware coming out next year that I'm really excited about. It'll be a pretty good game changer for us for sure. And so it's just been nonstop, but it's been better, man. It's this last 6 months of this year has just been so much better. So with this kind of clarity and focus and discipline, I'm really excited to see what happens in 2024.
I think
if the lights don't go off, right?
yeah. We're not doing Radio Free America like Red Dawn.
Ting ting, that little fairy just hanging out over there, which I forget about.
One of the things that I've always
appreciated. Whole different podcast, whole different name.
Yeah, we'll need a different name, different everything for that one. One of the things that's always been really cool about
set your ship ready
about chatting with you is whenever I think of modifications in the life cycle of a truck owner, how we change through our 20s, our 30s, 40s, 50s, and on. there's a handful of upgrades that I think always come first, and wheels, tires, suspension lift, how the truck looks is one of the first, but then right behind it, or maybe even first, is tuning. So I always like to ask you, because I think your finger's on the pulse of what diesel truck enthusiasts and owners are wanting. Have you seen, and what is the shift that you've seen, say, the second half of this year leading into 2024, whether it's with emissions on tuning, whether it's with them being more aware of monitoring data, more aware of their emission systems, more aware of how to keep their newer diesel truck reliable? What kind of things do you see on your side?
Like that kind of caused this shift in a sense that we've seen.
Yeah, and then what that shift is, because I see it. If I step back for a second, say from a podcast perspective, if 6 years ago I did an episode about emissions on tuning, I don't think many people would listen. Now they ask for it.
Right.
They want to know about it. They want to know the options. So I know that there's been a shift with the truck owners out there, but I don't know exactly how great of a shift that's been, because I can almost feel like I'm in an echo chamber, kind of in a way, just doing podcasts and talking about truck topics.
Understand.
Yeah, so I'm curious what you see.
Yeah. So, I think there's a few things that go into this, and I can't really say it just started this past year, the past 6 months. But if you remember a few years ago when we talked about it, I said it's going to take a while. I might see, 2 to 3 years before this starts playing out. And what I had figured at the time was for someone to get really good at this stuff, you almost can't hide it. You're going to become known a little bit. I mean, no one in this industry is famous, right? But in our small little worlds, people know our names. And the reason they know our names, not just PPEI, but yourself, ATS, every company, is because we've done innovative things over time and we've withstood the test of time. When all of this shift started happening, I was just pretty much another player in the game. Go back 2015, 2016. Yeah, we had a couple of niche things, but most of it, yeah, I had really good competition. We had Rob Coddins and Nick still around, but we were all playing in this same ballpark. And the thing was everyone was really talented. Like if I wasn't staying on my toes, my competitor's going to kick my butt, right? And sometimes they would, and sometimes I'd kick theirs. And that atmosphere is what drove innovation and parts and everything so hard. And when we started seeing those guys, getting picked out the market, and then especially once this stuff went criminal back in 2019, that's when I said, if we don't get a hold on this, which I think you and I did a podcast, and I said the diesel industry or the performance industry could be severely hurt or gone within 10 years. Yep. What I was saying by that is not because people love it less, but because the new guys coming in, the new generations that we need coming in, won't have that entry level invite with basic parts, tuners, exhaust intakes, your basic modifications that get them to barely outrun their buddy at the track. And then their buddy says, well, if I get the same modifications you have, then I'm gonna be even with you. So then he'll buy a little something extra, beats his buddy, the next guy. And it escalates until, you've got Ryan Milliken and LaVon Miller at the track battling each other. Yeah. But all of the people that were following the process along the times, that's their friends and their friends and their friends. Well, by 2019, 2020, the real drivers of the industry, and there's still some out there, I'm not discrediting anybody, but as a whole, you've seen it fall off, right? I don't think we've seen a new true turbo kit developed in 3 or 4 years, that's made it to market, that revolutionized something. We've seen stuff that copies stuff done before, but we haven't really seen anything too terribly new and innovative come out in the diesel world. And the gas world, from some of my friends I spoke to, is slowly starting to feel the pinch as well with tuning and then how they can sell the products. So going all in that to say is where I was saying before, the strong survive. So the quality now that's out there, granted, not all of it, right? But the majority of stuff out there is this guy sold it to this guy sold it to this guy, and now this guy has it. Now this guy just sold all of this stuff to 10 other people for $500, and now you've got 10 new tuners in the game. And everybody's got delete files, and you take and put in the truck, and it doesn't have codes. Okay. But what happens when it doesn't work perfect, or that customer actually upgraded their parts, or they actually want a real tuning revision or a good data log review to be able to make some changes for themselves personally? What we've seen over the past few years with that was that if you stole it or you're not actually a calibrator, then you get caught with your panties down. And you can get caught quite a bit. It generally, like a new company comes out. I was talking to the office about this today. A new company comes out and they're driven, right? And every time they get an email for an order, they get a dopamine drop.
Yeah.
The new employees, a new employee is the same way. That's why you'll see big corporations flow through employees quite a bit, because you catch all that new. Well, it's easy to start a business. It's easy to get a customer base, and it's extremely easy whenever you start a new business to take time with each customer, make sure that it's personable. And then you'll see that customer say, hey, that was such a cool experience. I don't get that with, this PPI company or this ATS or whoever. Like, we do the best we can, but at the end of the day, this is a business. This isn't a social gathering. But when you start a new business, that's always the protocol. You have to earn the trust of the public. So what we've seen over the past couple of years has been some of these new companies coming in and having a lot of customers praise them and praise them and praise them and how awesome they are. But once a company, I always say, let the company grow and then we'll find out what they're made of. Now that you've seen some of these companies grow, you're seeing them go, right? Because very easy to get started, get a company going, but once that thing starts blowing and going, and money aside, now it's a job, right? Eventually your hobby can remain a hobby, but it's still a job. If you don't go to work for 2 weeks, there are consequences. If you don't answer that email for 3 days, there are consequences. So like I said, in the beginning of starting businesses, it's super easy to keep them up. So I think what we're in right now, and what I've seen more this past year than I have the past two, the previous two, were these companies that all popped up. So like we go away and a couple others go away. You got all these new guys that pop up, and these companies just not being able to really make it. They built a lot of names online from customers from being personable with them, but when push comes to shove and the personal stuff goes out the window and you actually need what you paid for, I think that's what we're starting to see a lot of companies not be able to hang in there or hang in there. And that shift, what we've gotten more of this year was a shift for people saying that our customer support is the biggest reason they shifted, because they were getting good products and whatnot, but a lot of companies not able to keep up with the demand that they get with the expectations that they built the previous 2 years. And most folks just don't break past that. So I've seen a lot of companies go these past couple of years, and then also obviously the EPA. I mean, the EPA's they've got it to a point now to where no one knows what to do, right? And California's made it dang near illegal. I mean, not illegal, dang near impossible. Right now, it pretty much is impossible for any custom tuning company to go get an EO. It wasn't like that in the past. They're just inconsistent, and that's changed over the past, since the Biden administration. So that's the craziness as well. There's a tuner that I was working with recently that I was excited. He was going to come into the market. We've been helping him out a little bit here and there as we can. And he finally made a post a little while back that he was throwing in the towel because he checked how much it was going to cost to be able to get anything approved and sell it legally. And he was like, yeah, man, that's I'm out. Like, I can't get started on that. So we're seeing some of that as well. That's kind of my opinion. A side note, I'd posted on Garrett Cletus McFarland. I'd posted on his thing the other day and was just telling him how awesome it was doing what he's doing, because without stuff like that, this industry's gone. In my opinion, if the political atmosphere doesn't get fixed, it would be hurting. But you've got people like Garrett that are out there and doing these amazing episodes, and it's super entertaining, and it's more than just cars. So you're getting a lot of people interested. He's getting people interested in, and others doing similar, into cars. But there again, can the people get the parts they want? And if they can, for how long? That's always the question. So I don't know where it's going to end up at. It's going to be interesting, but I'm still kind of standing by what I'd said 4 years ago, that we'll see what this industry is made of within 10 years if the political atmosphere is not resolved.
One of the things, like looking back, and I don't know the exact time frames of this, so I'm just throwing out numbers. But one of the trucks that always sticks out to me is just was totally different when it hit the market was a 6.4 Power Stroke. And not because of the
Hmm.
way it sat stock, but because of the tuning options and the things that happened, how much power they could
CP3
make.
and oh
And,
man, a CP3 and piezo injectors, that's a party.
I don't know if it was 6 months that they were out or a year or so till they had tuning, transmission tuning. They're making 600 horsepower. It was just really eye opening. And I think looking at the industry over the last, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years, there was kind of that lull, which I like to talk about because I think if you're a truck enthusiast, you might not know why. You might remember the 6.4 you bought, you had awesome tunes within a year and you had all these options, or your 6.7 Cummins. But the work that goes into it to be able to stay in business, to have the customer service, to have the customers. But I start to see newer things come out. Like I had mentioned to you before the podcast, I was just on your guys' website. I just went there and I saw ASIN, I think it was beta testing for transmission tuning, 10-speed Allison stuff. And I was like, well, I got to get Kory on the podcast because for I don't know how many years we were told you can't tune the ASIN. There's nothing you can do for it. It's what holds it back. You can do all these great hard parts, but until we do the transmission tuning, it just is what it is. And then the 10-speed Allison, I think you and I touched on it a little bit over the years, is like that's what it really needs. And I wanted to ask you about those two things because the transmission goes, like and hopefully our listeners do as well. It goes hand in hand with your engine performance, your engine tuning, the way it shifts, keeping it reliable. So I wanted to ask you. Let's maybe start with the ASIN. What kind of program, what kind of options, what are you guys looking at for being able to tune those transmissions?
So we worked with EFI Live on the ASIN platform for the flashing protocol. So I'd asked EFI if they could put that in there, and they said, yeah, that's not a problem. We could get it done. And so they got that part done. We took and we got all the getting the binary files all done and parsed up to be able to fit and work with their software. We got all that stuff taken care of. So it was a little bit of a process, but if what's wild is I think it was 2 years ago when we did it. So we've been actually, I've had too much going on and just too crazily busy with everything to even take the time to finish developing the ASIN product. We had it working 2 years ago. And so finally, I ended up taking and I don't know, a few months ago, whatever it was. And I said, we have got to finish this. There's no reason to not finish it. The flashing works. EFI didn't have any mapping. No one had any, no one had the calibration tables defined in the software. So I had to do all of that manually. And that's just basically straight and hex, looking at a bunch of patterns and lines. And that was super difficult to do it that way for me, at least. And yeah, so the way I actually did it, since I didn't have any of the mapping, was, I'm going through the code and I've been doing this stuff a long time. So like I've seen a few different lines in the code that we call it 2D. And I recognize the lines as shift patterns. So, and there was just enough of them that would have matched the amount of modes or that are in the truck, exhaust brake on, tow haul, etc. Everything could potentially have had a different mode. Well, all that made sense. And then I had up shifts and then I had down shifts. And I said, well, this is probably the shift area. So what I did was I went into the code and I maxed it all out. And one of my employees, he said, what if you're maxing out the wrong thing? Or they asked me, why are you maxing it out? I said, because if I got it right, the truck won't shift out of first gear. So, and I'll know I hit a shift point and maybe not something else in the code. And so he said, well, what happens if it's not right? I said, well, you better be ready to replace the transmission. Things can go really south. But anyway, so I took and did that. And through doing it that way, I was able to find which modes are which and then which gears were which. And it's just time, it's just brute force. And so I took the time and I got it all done, got all the gears defined. And at the end of it all, what I found was the ASIN, it has some lazy spots. It kind of short shifts, requires a whole lot of pedal to downshift. They've got this, not all of them, but most of them's got this weird 1-to-2 or 2-to-1 thing that happens. And most of what I did in the tune file was first thing I was doing was just correct the shift points. And when I got the shift points where I wanted them, where the truck drove great, the acceleration great, the acceleration rates how I want it to be, like feels good, feels happy. The converter lockup OEM was perfect. with the raised shift point. So I was like, I don't even have to touch the torque converter in this thing. And then the Aizen already runs a ton of line pressure. You don't generally hear of too many failures due to that. And so I even left line pressure alone, and also getting the information about what line pressure to run from trans shops and stuff like that. Like, it's kind of a pain. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna leave it alone. People can modify that hydraulically. So what ended up being done on it was shift points, and just doing shift points on the Aizen made it right, made it perfect. If it used to, if I was going to get a RFE truck or a Aizen truck, I would always say the RFE. I was like, look, that thing sucks, but at least it drives better, than the Aizen does. It's like, Aizen's probably going to outlast it, but like, that's a better driving experience. Now I'm complete opposite. Go with the Aizen truck for sure. Like, we make it drive right. And yeah, we've sold a ton of them. I listed it as beta because I didn't, I knew there was going to be a ton of orders right when we released it, and which is already scary as it gets, when you're releasing 2013 to 2018 and different variations, different tuners. I mean, it's just a scary landscape to step in. And generally, I'm not too worried about it. But in this one, it was all, the way I had to develop it was weird, but I was very confident in it. And we released it, and I've had to make some revisions for like different tuners that have different torque to throttle ratios, so to speak. And because that'll change your shift points and the way it works. But I've had 100% sex. Oh yeah, 100% sex. What time? No. Yeah, I've had 100% sex, faux show. Definitely not a virgin. No, but we've had 100% success rate with every revision we've made. So, which is crazy on how many we tuned on the initial release. And then, some people are picky, and some people's got an S472 turbo that they were having to manually shift it the whole time they had it. So, being able to get literally everything done like it's supposed to, no refunds, that's a good day.
I think it caught my attention because if I ever thought of buying a 6.7 Cummins, I went through the 68 RFE stuff, and it just stuck in my memory. Like, I don't want to deal with it ever again. And I would want the Acid, and I drove a few of them. I think a 2018 and a 2020. I just didn't like how it shifted. It was just, it
Agreed.
affected the driving experience so much where I'm like, oh man, it's just, it was tough.
It feels piggy.
Yeah. It just
like, it feels heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it really caught my attention. I think that's really something that's cool, and I've personally wanted to see in the diesel industry. Like, I want to do more episodes about 6.7 Cummins with Aizen transmissions, because I think it does provide that alternative to Cummins owners.
It does. And we're the only company doing it right now. I've heard someone else did it or something like that, but I've never seen anything come to market. It doesn't matter who does it first. It's just what's to market. And I think, obviously, whenever we release something and no one else has it, then you're going to see a lot of pressure get put on companies like HP Tuners and EFI Live and these guys and say, hey, like, why can they do it and we can't? So what I'm hoping is that we'll take and we'll see, over time here, whenever, that one of these companies will come out and give a full, nice definition editor with all the maps in it. And then maybe I won't have to try to reverse engineer the rest of it. But I think that I think it'll get picked up because it's just such a hot item. I mean, if you have an Aizen truck and you don't have this trans tuning, your truck sucks worse than a stock truck on the road. That's my opinion of it, because if you have to manually shift the thing everywhere, that sucks. And if you have a stock turbo truck with a tune, well, that sucks too. If it's got an Aizen in it, like, they just shift like crap. And then when you tune them, it's even worse. So literally just by fixing the shift points, it resolves it. I've had a couple of them that, like, they wouldn't shift into overdrive and stuff like that, but that was like a different gear ratio, this tire size, etc. And we've already got files built for if a customer has that issue, that we can send them a file, and it's been working right out the gate. And I think within 1 month, I'll have it organized enough on my from the website to our library that when they put their mods list in, it'll automatically select the right file and get it right out to them. So we're getting really close to that. But I made it beta because it was just so many. I knew it was going to be a ton of trucks and a lot of different weird combinations. And you just never know when you release something new, what's gonna end up coming out? Is there something I can't make a revision for, or something that doesn't work when I try to, that I can't test here at the shop? So we made it beta, but we finally taken the beta name off of it. So we're ready to go.
That's cool. That's cool. I thought of a question to ask you. You mentioned the torque converter strategy. You didn't have to change with it, and the line pressure was good. And this is a very general question, but when you tune transmissions, and it could be any year range, is there one in particular that stands out to you as they're really good as far as an OEM strategy? Like, there's not a whole lot you need to change with it, or do they all leave something on the table?
They all leave something on the table. Man, I don't know which one I would consider to be the best from the factory. I mean, the problem I have is they all just part slip and waste so much energy through the torque converter, and they do this for NVH reasons. So noise, vibration, harshness. Whenever someone does our trans tuning, especially on like like an Allison or like a 10R, 6R, 5R, whatever, one thing they'll always notice is that it locks the torque converter up earlier. And the reason for that is because you want to lock it up as soon as you can without sacrificing drivability or taking and making it dump off between gears. Like you want to lock it right, but whenever the torque converter is locked up early, it's so much more efficient. You're not wasting any energy throughout the torque converter. And the biggest thing I have is all the manufacturers, they're not locking unless you're in tow haul, normal drivability, they're not locking the converters up until sometimes at 55 plus. And so the whole time you're going there, it's just kind of I call it a squish box. It's just a sloshy, you could bang it up and down. I like the thing to be able to grab a gear. I like to take the torque and coming from the engine and put it to the tire and not waste it through a torque converter. So that's one thing people have noticed with all of our transmission tuning is that. But another thing that's interesting that people don't think about is whenever you lock the torque converter up, you increase the acceleration. The acceleration rate is primarily increased as well. So the shift points you may have had, say with an unlock converter, that shift point you wanted to have at 20 miles an hour, you might be short shifting it now just because it locked the torque converter up, because whenever it gets to 20 miles an hour faster because you locked the torque converter up and it's more efficient. So let's say we locked the torque converter up. Now it got to 20 way quicker and it shifts. And when it shifts, it falls on its face. Because when you increase the acceleration rate by applying the torque converter, the original shift points a lot of times won't work unless you're at super high throttle. So we have to actually come in and fudge all the shift points up to a different spot than what it would be. Like in our 10-speed tunes, it looks crazy. They're actually lowered in one area. They're up in one area. Like if I looked at this tune file and I hadn't seen it before, I'd say, that tuner might have been smoking a little crack when he did that. It doesn't look right. But when you actually get in the truck and you test it and you run it, you find that the way that the OEM had it looking kind of funny, there's a reason for that. So the old days of taking and like 10 years ago, people taking it looks pretty good and then you just blend it and it's a big, pretty curve. A lot of this newer stuff, it's not always just a pretty map. Sometimes it'll look a little bit funny, but if you actually made it just smooth like you would think it would be, it's not as desirable as the OEM, the way the OEM logic kind of worked. So and especially since now these vehicles have so many more gear ratios, I mean, it's a lot of work to do a really good trans tune that's not just good for that truck, but is going to be universally really good.
You mentioned the 10-speed Allison, and that one, well, the 10-speed Ford intrigues me as well, but just the 10-speed application. I don't know a whole lot about the 10-speed Allison. I think we've touched on it a little bit. I've talked with some transmission builders a little bit on it. But with the transmission tuning, tell me about that. Tell me what that was like. Tell me about the difference between driving like a stock L5P with a 10-speed and then one with a transmission tune.
Yeah, the stock one I hate with a passion. I did since the first time I drove one. The stock 10-speed shift strategy. I mean, it just feels like it doesn't go anywhere. It makes a lot of noise. You see a lot of 3,000 RPMs and it doesn't go anywhere. The manufacturer put all this torque into these new engines. They are torque monsters. I mean, a tuned LB7s back in the day couldn't make the torque that the stock trucks are making now, right? So they've got all this torque, but then they don't use it unless it's in, seventh gear or so going up a mountain. Everywhere else, it's just SpongeBob. It's banging 3,000 RPMs. Well, the way we do it is as soon as it sees enough, once it has the right load and the right amount of boost, then it's allowed to lock the torque converter. I don't want it to lock and then, choke the turbocharger or fall on its face. You want a consistent, nice acceleration rate. Whenever it locks the converter up, you should see a small spike in boost, and that's what you want. And with that 10-speed, without lock up on early, we lock the converter up as early as 15 mile an hour in some conditions, and it feels perfect. A lot of times you wouldn't know it, besides the fact that it pulls way, way, way harder. But you won't see that just 3,000 RPMs hanging out, nothing going on. One of my, put it this way, I'd be willing to bet if you had a customer with a 10-speed with no take two stock trucks, actually take one and put 100 horsepower tune in it, and then take a stock truck with just my trans tune in it with the 10 speeds, I would be willing to bet that the 10-speed with the truck with my tuning and stock engine tuning will outrun that truck with just 100 horsepower tune. And the reason is you can have all the horsepower you want, but if you're not putting it to the ground, you're going to get smoked by the guy that is, So that's the biggest thing is we put torque to the ground. The OEM factory doesn't put it to the ground until you're past 50 something mile an hour.
I think I saw on maybe Facebook or Instagram you had posted, I think you got a 2024 Duramax, and I thought, I'm sure he's got some cool stuff he's working on or going to have on that thing.
We're playing. We've learned a lot. Unlike the 23 Ford, I've got a really, really, really the 24 Duramax will happen. That's not too scary. That tuning's gonna come. Like stuff like the 23 Ford, that's gonna be a long ways out. You might end up seeing a file or two floating around the market, but if you tried to get a change done on that file, chances are it won't happen.
What makes it one so hard?
The 23 Ford, yeah. It's a new ECU. So a lot of people were thinking they were going to pull the old dirty swap a 20 ECU or 21 ECU into the 22 truck trick, but it doesn't work like that on the 23 because it's a whole new ECU. For what it's worth, we've already got one all apart and looked at all of it and did all kinds of work and research on it, and that's going to end up being a processor swap game. I'm hoping someone proves me wrong, right? But and it's possible. And like I said, there'll be probably a tune or two floating out there, but try to get it revised for something. It's not going to happen. So it won't be a customizable tune. So you want a custom tune in it. That's going to be a good bit of work on the 23. They haven't no one's cracked the 22 Power Stroke, right? Like it's not cracked. It's got one of the tune things floating around, but no custom tuning. And so take the 22 that still hasn't been cracked. We're going into 24, and they already came out with the 23 ECUs worse than the 22. It's going to have manual labor on the ECU to work, is the way it looks, and we're involved, so we're working on it. But I'd be surprised you've seen that in the next 6 months. But the Duramax, though, I think we're going to be good. I think we'll be fine. If anyone's saying they're in it and tuning it right now, they're lying. They're not. They're lying. We're not in it yet either, but we're talking to it. So there's that. Once I have flash protocol for it, it wouldn't take me long. The tuning and mapping for it part isn't scary. It's not bad. But the flashing is what you would expect Global B. So, but it's not off. It's not offline yet. So that's still good. The 23 Power Stroke, that's going to be a different animal. And I've seen people trying to swap their 2021 ECUs in. Quit trying that. It's not going to work.
Do you get a lot of feedback or inquiries for like the smaller Duramax and like the half tons and some of those? That popped in my head because I did an episode recently with Lenny Reed from Dynomite Diesel Products, and he I think he's bought 2 of them, I think, and he's really excited about them. And I know you've always been at the forefront of innovation with tuning and diagnosing and just analyzing platforms. So is that something that you see from your side? The people are wanting to modify them, wanting to get a little bit more power, get a little bit more performance from them?
Yeah, for sure. And a little quick story on that. So um we worked with HP tuners on the development of the 1500 3.0, the little mini Duramax. We worked with them on that. We went back and forth, helped define what more mapping it needed, and tested flash protocol, PIDs. Did a lot of work with those guys, and the same with the TCM, and we got it all done, like 100% completed, and then got hung up with carb. So I have the tuning finished. It's done. If I got a green check mark, I could send out tunes for everyone on today, but we're hung up at carb. But I love that truck. So I had one and drove it for about a year. I used it during the hurricane and I abused it. I was doing full wheel drive burnouts, trying to pull trees across the road and had no business pulling. And I couldn't kill it. I didn't care if I killed it. It was tore up from the hurricane already. Insurance is going to take care of this truck. So let's see what it's made of. I couldn't kill it. It's awesome. I like it enough that I told my dad to go get one, and that's what he daily drives. They're awesome.
They're really
Yeah,
intriguing.
huge demand.
It's a really intriguing platform, I think, because you might not need a 3/4 or 1 ton, but you still want the torque of a diesel engine, and those trucks are so nice. I've looked at them
They are, and
a
they're
bunch of
torque
times.
monsters. Yeah, I mean, they're at peak torque at like 1450, 1500 RPMs. So that's what my dad said. He's like, man, I hardly ever hear, like, I never have to hardly put it to the floor. It just pulls. Yeah, it's awesome. It's a great truck. If I, and people ask me all the time, would you get the Ford 3.0, the Eco Diesel, or the Duramax? Duramax, hands down. So that thing's awesome. I've owned all three of them. The Duramax by far. The GM nailed that little 3.0 liter motor. It's awesome.
It's cool to see that they've still continued to support it still in new trucks where, like the smaller Power Stroke, the F-150. They don't offer that anymore. I'm not sure about the Eco Diesel, what it's going to be in, or how that's shaking out. But it's cool to see that they're still an option. 'Cause people wanted that forever. They'd always say, "I want a half
Oh
ton with a
yeah.
diesel. I don't need the 3/4 or the 1 ton." And it's been cool to see that on the market.
Yeah, it has. It has. And our tuning with it, we did I think I'm gonna go off the top of my head here, but I think we did like a revised stock and then a 20 and a 40 horsepower tune for it. And a 60, but I ended up backing it down to 50. The 60 was just people would end up having regen issues on it. Like they won't be able to control themselves. So I made 67, backed it to 60. Uh Let my cousin and a couple of others drive it for a while, and they couldn't keep their foot out of it enough to stay out of regen. So I backed it down to 50, and then it had no more regen issues or nothing like that. So that's what we've got them up to now. And whenever I say beat on them, I mean like we really beat on them. Like yeah. So they're awesome, man. They make a ton of torque, and especially when it's coupled with transmission tuning, it's the kind of the same thing I said earlier. When you lock the converter on that truck early on, I mean, you can shred the tires off, and it's a 1500. Try to do that with the gas version like that. It's not going to do what the diesel version does with a tuned DCM and TCM that's done properly.
Is there a diesel truck that you tune where you're looking at what you can do with the engine, and you can push it to a certain power level, but there's something else that holds it back with the OEM setup, whether it's a transmission, something in the engine, the turbo, where you just wish, hey, I wish they had a better transmission. I wish they had a better turbo because I could still keep this emissions compliant. I could still get them more power, but it's this one part that I just can't do it. I've always been curious about that and wanted to ask you.
Yeah, I mean the limitation's always primarily the turbocharger. We generally always got enough fuel on board to cause a rich mixture if we wanted to with the stock turbo, but a small turbo upgrade, uh, I mean, it unlocks them. You take an L5P, for example, and, about 575 is where their peak efficiency. We've got them up to 597. And, you can't hold them on the floor right there forever. But at 575, you can, where, a little small 63 millimeter or 66 millimeter turbo upgrade or something. Now you can keep it held on the floor at 600 horsepower.
Yeah.
And so yeah, you always wish that there was a little bit more air on board. But another thing is that and a couple of turbo manufacturers do it with us, but Gone are the days of taking a turbo and just tossing it on a truck and it's going to work. With emissions present, we get people all the time. Hey, I put a 68 VGT on it. They said it works with the emissions. Can you send me a tune for it? Say no. It's if it was deleted, sure. I don't have to worry about a fact checker back there. However, that has to be developed now. You've got a pressure. We'll use an example of that is let's say to run. I'm gonna give a rough example. Let's say to run 700 DGTs, run down the road 55 miles an hour. The vane position in your turbocharger might be sitting at 40%, 50%, and everything's happy. The exhaust pressure in the pipe's 1.5 pounds. Everything's chilling. All right. Now let's take a big VGT turbo and we put it on there. Well, in order to maintain the same EGTs, I'll need to tighten up the vane position a little bit to get it to flow the same air, right? So when we do that, EGTs look good, air to fuel ratio looks good. Oh crap, I've got 3 pounds in the tailpipe now. Well, that 3 pounds that's in the tailpipe, the computer's eventually probably going to get pissed off about it and say, we got a pressure differential issue over here. And that's the part where I have to come back and say, okay, well, it's because I had to tighten up the vanes in the turbo so much that it caused more back pressure on that system. So the only fix to that would be to lower your boost pressure a little bit, to open up the vane some to relieve that. Well, now I did that, but I got 300-degree higher EGTs now.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now we've got an over-temp condition and the EGR is trying to overcompensate. Oh, that's nice. So those are the things that we run into emissions present with aftermarket turbos. And that's what I've been talking to a few turbo manufacturers about. Like, hey, I'm with you. I will do it for free. But I can't keep putting turbos on trucks over here to develop so that your ports work with these trucks. But we're on the same team. Get a truck, put your turbo on it, drive it, make sure everything's happy, pressure test it, send it down to me. I'll develop the calibration. Give me a few weeks. I'm doing it for free. And that's me just wanting to see the industry, wanting to see parts manufacturers get involved and not be scared of it, And but the thing is, we can't just keep putting turbochargers on trucks and it not work and spend all the time doing it. So I think for any manufacturer that wants to work with us, man, I won't even charge you. I want to see parts come into the market that work with emissions present trucks. So I want to see more aftermarket parts come into the industry. We worked with a few of them and those parts work great. They run like they're supposed to, but the initial investment's obviously a little bit higher these days. But as of now, I'm not even charging. I just want to see it. I just want to see this market keep going, because if a kid's got an emissions present truck and they're not going to do all the stuff to it, well, I don't want their ceiling to be right there. I want them to be able to go and have some fun and get involved in the industry. And we want to see that happen through, turbocharger sales. That's always your first big boy modification, upgrade the airflow. So I think it's going to be the responsibility of calibrators and manufacturers working together to make sure these products work. Because if you it's worse to take a product that you think will work emissions present just because it retains the emission systems and it not work, than it is just to not release it at all, because it makes not only the product look like it doesn't work that well, it makes the product and calibrator look like it works that well, but it also puts a bad taste in people's mouths saying, oh, it doesn't work with the emission systems. That's not the case. It just needs to be developed properly and calibrated properly.
Do you find there's more companies in the industry that are, I don't want to say less afraid, but maybe more apt to try to invest in the design, the testing, with things outside of tuning, like whether it's fuel systems, turbos, other components? So somebody almost can one day be able to, call PPEI or email in and say, hey, I'm going with turbo A, I'm going with injectors from company B. And you were able to provide a file for that and everybody's happy. It's all emissions present. There's testing for everything. Is that something you see is happening with other companies?
I mean, if it doesn't, I don't know what their game plan is for the long haul. It's just welcome to the new era. It's the new world. And not only is a new era from a political standpoint, but the vehicles and the ECUs and the emission systems have really evolved as well over time. So the tighter, I can tell you, I won't spill beans yet, but like a small modification that's emissions present on my 24 model caused a code that has never coded on anything else. And the reason it called a code, it coded was because the tolerances in the emission system have tightened up that much. So the part that we installed actually lowered the pressure in the pipe, and which means it's more efficient, right? It's flowing more air, and that small pressure drop was just enough to cause it to code, which didn't exist before. You could do it to 23 LML, I mean L5P, no issue. 24, nope, it's there. So we know that the tolerances on the new models are even tighter. So the tighter they get all that stuff, unless a company just intends that there's going to be race tuning forever, which hey, there might be. Hopefully there is. But if all your eggs are in that basket, that's not one I'll be putting stock in, because you have to evolve. You can do both, but I think for longevity, you really need to evolve. And some folks will see it as like, oh, the emission system sucks. I don't want to work with that. It just sucks. It's junk. Yeah, I don't care for them either. But if you can get your stuff to work with the fact checker on the back, the amount of knowledge you gain while doing it is so great that that knowledge can then translate over to the products you're developing. You know, a lot of these guys that are making some of these aftermarket turbos would never tell their customer to put it on their truck had they actually logged all the emission systems at the same time and see that, oh, this might need a revision. It might not work, you know. But people don't really do that. They'll take but some do, but most will take and just put it on the truck, do a wide open throttle dyno pull on their emissions present truck and drive it around for a little while, and it all seems fine. And that's okay. And it might be fine on that truck. What happens when GM does the next update and the next update has a 15% tighter tolerance in a certain emissions area? Well, now that no longer works at all. You know, so the best thing is you've got to know what the tolerance levels are and then keep them within the minimum maximum ranges. And then you know that it's going to stay happy for the long haul.
I think, and we've definitely chatted about it on previous podcasts, is the landscape in which a company can sell products for a diesel truck is so different with EPA and enforcement and all those kind of things. You have to do the testing and the legwork beforehand. Otherwise, it's such a huge risk to just release something out there. And
yeah, and that's what we get hit with a lot is you know, a customer will get sold from XYZ these parts that work with emissions present stuff, and the manufacturer thinks it works with emissions present stuff because they didn't remove emissions, but that's totally not the case. You could not remove the emission system, but modifying the air or fuel, you modify the air to fuel ratio. Now the emission systems are reacting to the new parts. All of this has to go hand in hand, you know, and I'm sure there's other I don't know, maybe, hopefully, but there'd be other calibrators out there saying, hey, we want to take on this challenge. Like we need to do it now. Hey, later on, maybe in 2 years, once everybody starts doing it, then we can charge for it. You know, we can start charging for this service. But as of now, we need to just try to keep this freaking side of the industry alive. So I'm hoping I've got a truck sitting in my shop right now, a turbo manufacturer shipped down. It arrived middle of last week. It's a brand new Ford with a big turbo on it and a bigger turbo. And we're going to start testing on it. But I'm really hoping that more manufacturers will want to get involved with this stuff.
I definitely think it's cool what you guys are doing. And the transmission side, it's always been one of my favorite parts of trucks. I think because feeling what a stock one was for so long and then transmission tuning and then a built transmission, I'm like, oh man, this is as cool as any of the engine stuff that I did. And I know that people, it is. It's not as cool as like lifting the hood and there's a nice shiny turbo and, you know, dual CP3. It's not as cool as that, but you feel it all the time and it makes such a big difference. I love the analogy you gave of taking a truck, emissions on, 100 horse tune, another truck, emissions on, but with transmission tuning, and it being quicker, you know, over a given distance, because I think there's a lot of performance to gain there. I know you're a busy guy, but I did want to ask you, as far as like 2024 and looking towards
I'll toss in that. You mentioned 2024, but I'll add on to that. So the increase that we've seen on the Ford, I think it was the Ford Duramax, regardless, probably it was about the same results regardless. But just transmission tuning on a stock Ford, we gained 140 foot-pounds of torque in the drivability ranges.
Wow.
Right after 70 mile an hour, things are locked up. Everything's normal. But under 50 mile an hour or whatever, you had access to an additional safe OEM approved 140 extra foot-pounds of torque,
That's a big
just
difference.
transmission tuning. That's huge. Yeah. The 140 foot-pounds of torque, if you take and that would generally require a 70 horsepower tune to gain 140 foot-pounds of torque. So installing just the transmission file until it's full lockup like it would be from OEM, that's like getting a 70 horsepower tune that you have zero to worry about because the engine tuning still completely stopped, but you gained 140 foot-pounds of torque. It's awesome.
Yeah, and especially in the area where you're spending most of your time driving
Right.
or really need that extra torque.
Yep.
Like looking into 2024, what are some things we should pay attention to with PPEI? Some things that maybe you can't talk about yet, but just some things maybe you're working on or different platforms, different things you're going to tackle.
One thing I'm excited about that I'll hit on a little bit is, we've been working on our own device for a really long time, and we haven't stopped. Like that's a daily thing. That's every day, and that's been every day for years. I've had either me and a team member, or a team member specifically. I've got 3 full-time guys working on it, and they've been working on it for years. So that's going to come out, and that'll help out a lot. That'll allow us to separate ourselves. We're still going to have all the custom tuning and do all the custom tuning stuff people known us for the past 15 years or whatever. But I'm also going to have another brand that will be literally, a plug and play solution. And it'll work all through the cell phones. There's a cool app, but my future plans for it, which once it releases, I'll talk about the future plans. But the future plans for it have never been done in the automotive industry. And I think it's going to completely revolutionize the expectations of technology whenever you play with anything performance on your vehicle. That might not even release in 24. That part would be 25. But let's just say you could race people for money and not be by them.
That's going to be cool.
Which is interesting, right?
Yeah.
Which is interesting. But yeah, you can be street outlaws and have legitimate street outlaws races, and people can watch, and you can be in 2 different areas.
It's really interesting.
It's crazy. It's massive.
Well, you think about the way of the world and how technology has changed it over time. Distance isn't what it used to be. The way we consume content, information, do business deals with people, talk to people, network with people. It's not all the way like when I was growing up, or what my expectation was way back when was you had to be face to face, you had to go to a meeting, you had to go to a convention, you had to do these things, and the world isn't like that anymore. So it really piques my interest to think about automotive and performance.
Yeah.
Embracing that.
It's going to be really, it's going to be cool. So initially the device launches as a tuner, a data logger, a basic handheld. It's got codes and all that good stuff in it. Got some cool little features. You can do manual regens and all this other stuff. But my plans for this are not what the initial release are. It's going to be awesome. It's always going to continually get better. But my plans for the future of it is what I think is the future of the future of automotive performance. It's going to be very cool. I'd like to, whenever the music industry came out whenever like iTunes came out and iMusic and all this stuff, it really disrupted a lot of the way the industry worked and the industry standard. But I have a plan that if this works out, like I would like to see it work out, that it could be incorporated into every drag strip in the country and every shop in the country, and actually create a whole new world of racing that did not exist before. And I'm just super pumped. It's being worked on. So we're working on it. It's just it's very complicated, but it's doable.
Very cool. Well, I appreciate your time today chatting with me, answering those questions that I had about, transmissions, and just catching up with you. I love hearing what you're working on and what you're doing for the industry. So
I'll say too, and that's one thing for 24, but another thing for 24 that I'll be doing is, I've gotten involved with some more guys that really bring outside of the diesel industry, but just the business aspect in just business in general. I've got so many friends that are doing so many good things for a lot of the younger men and youth and aspiring entrepreneurs in this country that, I've tried to kind of stay out of any limelight with that as much as possible. It never felt, I don't know the right word for it, but we'll just call it humble. I don't want to be the person that's talking, I've done this, so you should follow this step and do that. But the more I'm online, the more I see stuff, and especially talking to people. I've been talking to people a lot more lately, being a little less of an introvert. And man, there's just a lot of misguided direction and a lot of negativity and lost hope in the ability of people being able to make it without just being a one-hit wonder, but to sustain business and sustain finances, and then how to rise above everyone else around you. And it's really not that difficult of a task, but I see a lot of the influencers and guys that are talking, and man, it's super relatable. But I come from a little bit different aspect of it all, as I did all that while battling the United States government. And so I've gotten to see the underbelly of the legal system in a way that most people will never experience, and pray they never get to experience it. So with every aspect of this was bad, what would I have done different before? I don't have a ton of things I can say I would do differently from a legal or business standpoint. Not talking about deletes or anything, just business wise. I don't have much I would do differently because we were so freaking structured. Like, the business model worked, the way we conducted ourselves, to the public worked. Everything just really worked well. Had hurdles along the way, but the knowledge we gained, and I'll go ahead and say, I could say the tests that we've passed, this has to be shared. This has to be shared. People need to know how to properly structure their businesses, know how important it is to have their taxes right, how important it is to protect your business and protect yourself personally. And then also, what it takes to do it and to rise above the crop from a guy that eats off his paper plates in the morning with the foodie coat, and does have the vacation home and fought a $10+ million battle with the government. So I'm going to be doing a little bit more speaking and talking, and I'm not going to go down the influencer rabbit hole. That's not what I want to do. But I have a lot of messages to share, and I think we could help a lot of people and restore faith in a lot of people that maybe have lost some faith. And, if only one person tuned in and I helped one person, then that's worth it.
I'll definitely be tuning into that. Make sure you let me know when you start.
We'll start it. We'll start it in a room that's right down this hallway, and you're going to have to come down for it. So it'll be some very interesting, fun conversations. It'll be a great time, and you'll definitely be one of the first.
I definitely look.
So we look up to you and love what you do, man. You've been one of the only folks really doing this and doing it the way you do it in the industry, and I hope more people realize the value that you bring to this whole entire industry. It's a lot of work to do what you do, and I appreciate it.
Thanks. We definitely appreciate that. We're big fans of yours, and I appreciate your time on this afternoon chatting with me. Yep. And look forward to chatting again in the future, seeing some of these cool things you have coming up. Yeah.
It's going to be awesome. The future's bright. Future's bright.
Don't forget, Diesel fans, make sure and head on over to Kershaw.kaiusa.com. Use code Diesel2023 for 20% off site-wide. It's a great way to save some money. Get some really cool gear. So if you're in the market for a knife for hunting, fishing, EDC, something around the job site or house, they've got a ton of different choices for different blade shape, blade length, handle designs, bunch of cool stuff. So definitely make sure and head on over if you're in the market. Also want to give a shout out to some of our Patreon supporters: Tyler Loewen at 23 Diesel, John J Cole, all of our other Patreon supporters, all you who follow us on YouTube and podcast apps, social media. We appreciate all your support here in year 7 of the Diesel Podcast, and look forward to bringing you more of the content that you want to hear in 2023. Until next time, keep the shiny side up.